Good afternoon. Welcome to Starboard Consulting's Coffee Chat. Today's featured presentation will be Maximo 8 integrations with Amy Tatum and Tom Sarasin. Amy, welcome. Thanks for joining us again.
All right. Thanks, Alex. I'm happy to be here. I hope you're having a great summer. I'm in the Orlando area. We hosted Maximo World last week, so that was great fun to get to see people in person and reunite the Maximo community. But so we're carrying on with our summer chat series. We've been doing this series now. This is the second one. We started off in July with KPIs with Lonnie and the fabulous Pam Denny. And today I'm here with Tom Sarasin. We're going to talk a little bit about the integration framework and some of the new features with that. And then we will close out this series with mobile inspections. So I'm very excited to be here with everybody today and carry on this summer series. Also very excited that summer is Starboard's birthday. So we celebrated 14 years just this past June of being a quality Maximo implementer and working with the other business partners in our Maximo community and clients, just delivering all kinds of Maximo services. And integrations are one of the things that we do a lot of. So this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart because I know over the 20 plus years of implementing Maximo, started working with integrations back in the days of the MIA, the Enterprise Adapter, before it became the MIF. So joining me today then is Tom. So Tom, you want to introduce yourself real quick and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I am with Maximo. I'm a product manager. I've been with Maximo for over 20 years, and the bulk of my time with Maximo has been spent around integration. I am involved with other areas, Maximo mobile configuration and a few other areas, other integration products, but a large percentage of my time is with the integration framework, or the MIF. If you've talked to people, they call it the MIF. Yeah. For short. And in general, for those who aren't that familiar, the MIF is basically the tooling capability inside of Maximo that lets you push data from Maximo to other systems or receive data from other systems, and basically allow Maximo to share data between systems. And it offers many different features. And when you go to customers, when I see customers, talk to customers, they often can have what you would think of as fairly complex integrations where they literally can have, I've seen customers with over 100 plus integration points. So it's a piece of the product that's usually used pretty substantially by a lot of customers.
Yeah, absolutely. We see that a lot. I don't know that I've got any clients with over 100 interfaces, but when you talk about using the MIF, both as a data onboarding tool and as an integration tool with other enterprise applications and to onboard, I mean, there's so much data around now. So even when you start looking at sensors and devices and things like that, there's just a lot of information that could come in, and the MIF is definitely a good way to make that happen. So as we chat today, we've got 3 takeaways that we want everybody to be able to leave us in another 20-25 minutes. One is just an introduction of Kafka. And then the second is utilizing the API keys, which are a new feature of the integration framework. And then the third is a new system property that allows for split data posts. So those are our 3 kind of things that we're hoping everybody just walks out the door with this afternoon. But before we jump into those topics, Alex, I think you were going to run a quick poll for us. Did we lose Alex? All right, so the poll is out there. I'm not sure what happened to Alex's audio, but basically, how familiar are you with the Maximo Integration Framework? Anything from I haven't heard with it or really worked with it before, I've got a basic working knowledge, or I've got advanced knowledge. So looks like the responses are coming in, and most folks have a base knowledge of the MIF, so that's great. And we'll hopefully, by the time you leave today, you'll have a little bit more base knowledge of the MIF. So thanks a lot for participating in the poll, and let's go ahead and get started. So our first takeaway is just to introduce Kafka, because this is new. Most of us that have been working with the integrations for a long time are very accustomed to, WebSphere and the JMS queues and some of that, and the integration framework as it's currently designed with WebSphere. And I know that's going to change. So starting off with Kafka, and I did a little research before our chat today for some trivia, because I was curious of how the name Kafka came to pass. And it's actually named after a 20th century German-speaking writer named Franz Kafka. And the reason that name was chosen is because it's a system optimized for writing. So let's talk about that a little bit, Tom. Tell us, what is Kafka? How do we get it? And how is it different from what we're used to today with the WebSphere queues?
Okay, so starting, and actually, we're saying it's in 8. It actually is supported. We recently added it to 7.6. But basically, the primary path on Kafka is, for us, is as we move to the application suite, version 8, inside there, we're doing a shift. Maximo is doing a shift to move from WAS-ND to Liberty. And with Liberty, you don't get the full-blown JMS that you get with WebSphere. So many of you have done integration with WebSphere or WebLogic for that matter. Yeah. If you're using a clustered JVM deployment, which a lot of customers use, you can't do that with Liberty and JMS. So what we determined, or what we decided to do, was introduce support for Kafka, which is an open source queuing technology, and add that as an option to support integration messages flowing through queues that are Kafka queues rather than JMS queues. Now, a couple of things. One is we're not taking away JMS support. So our JMS support is obviously in WAS-ND, it's SI bus, but a lot of customers use WebSphere MQ or some other JMS compliant queuing, and you can still use that. That's not going away. So if you're a customer who uses WAS-MQ or other JMS compliant tool, JMS compliant queues, you can still do that, and the MIF will still support that. With Kafka, one of the main reasons we went after Kafka is we wanted to offer a no cost, it's open source, a no cost way for you to have queuing, and have queuing that supports the multi JVM type deployment. So using Kafka in mass or manage 8, you'll be able to deploy an inbound queue, a sequential inbound, continuous inbound, sequential outbound, just like you do today. You can have, it's not JVMs, but you can have multiple pods with, supporting queues, and get that multi-threaded processing across multiple pods, like you would get multi-threaded processing across JVMs in a JMS deployment. So that was our primary reason for providing this. Now, I'll also say this. Liberty does support JMS. Its support, though, is limited, and it doesn't support the multi-JVM type of deployment. So I think for some people who use Maximo like as I'll say a development environment, a standalone environment, maybe not a production environment, you may consider using the Liberty JMS as an option inside a mass, because it is available there. But in a production environment, it would support. We would recommend you either use a JMS compliant queue like WAS-MQ, or you consider Kafka. Now, on the queuing approaches, like I said, we have the same types of queues, sequential, continuous, that same processing methodology supported. The difference on the continuous queue is there's no MD concept of an MDB, message-driven bean, that you configure to consume messages out of the queue. Instead, what you're doing is you're configuring multiple cron tasks to work with multiple partitions of a queue, of a Kafka queue. So the deployment's a little bit different. but in essence, it gives you basically the same behavior. And we have documented, there is documentation on this, and we've highlighted, there are some subtle differences, and we've tried to highlight this in the documentation we provide around Kafka, so that it's, people looking at it will understand, some of the slight differences there between that and what they're used to if they're currently using JMS.
Okay. So we'll make sure we get a link to that documentation in the chat or published with the follow-up to this session. I think another thing that it's important to point out is, what's changing here is that section there in the middle and how the integration gets deployed. The integration framework itself, so the pieces of that are in Maximo, the object structures and the enterprise services and published channels, those things haven't changed, right? So I've still got all my processing rules and data elements and things that go there.
Exactly. All the MIF components are the same. What you'll see different in the MIF side is in the external system application, mm-hmm. There's a configuration, I think the name is called add modify queues.
Right.
That configuration's a little bit different if you're using Kafka. There's also an additional action there. I'll be honest, I forget the name of it, but the configurations of pointing your external system to the queues is just a little bit different based on it being Kafka. But other than that, all the integration components all work the same way.
Great. All right. So let's move on to the second takeaway for today, and that's the API keys. So with security moving to the mass level with the application suite, we won't have max auth any longer. So there's this new API key. And we've actually started using that in 7.6 already. So I know this is available now, but let's talk a little bit about what the API key is, why we're using it and how it's different from maybe more traditional authentication methods that were used for integrations in the past.
Yeah, so you're right. Like you said, it's available. We started supporting this in 7.6. It basically simplifies the integration from a authentication perspective, where you don't have to, all your different clients that may be connecting Maximo don't need to accommodate whatever Maximo's authentication scheme that's being used. So it basically, by generating a key for a specific user, so the key's for a user, so when you come in, if you set up the key for MXN to ADM user, the integration user, or you create your own users, it's going to follow that user. And then from there, it obviously picks up the authorization of that user, whatever security groups that user's in. So that way you basically get the same behavior as you would if you were using MaxAuth and using Wilson in our demo database, something like that. Mm-hmm. But it really, the goal here is to, part of the goal here is to simplify it in terms of just using a key, and the administrator, anybody in Maximo can terminate that key. If you need, for whatever reasons, need to shut that down, you can easily shut it down through the application by removing the key or changing the expiration. Now, our primary reason for manage when we get to the application suite is we have to, right? And manage authentication isn't controlled at in mass, the authentication isn't controlled at the managed level, the Maximo level, it's controlled at the mass level. Yeah. So we, as an authentication scheme, we have to use an API key from an integration perspective to connect to manage. And so that was kind of a requirement. And that is, like you said, that is the only option when you, that is the option you'll use for integration when you move to mass.
Yeah, this is a great option. I know we've set them up where we've got, keys that are tied to users that can only create service requests. Like you said, the security is controlled there. And historically, particularly when we started doing a lot of REST interfaces, where to store that username and password for authentication was always a bit of a security issue if you put it in system properties or max vars or something like that. So being able to generate the keys is really a reliable and secure method for doing that. So I like the API keys. I think those are a great addition to the system.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of people, feel the same way and shifting to using that. I expect, that'll pick up steam, even for those customers still, using 7.6.
Right. Okay. So our third topic here is the split data posts, and this is a new one as well. And we were just chatting about this a little bit before the session started. So let's tell the audience a little bit about where this came from and how split data posts are different from what they might be seeing today.
Right. So basically, what we're doing here is we're giving you an option to when you post data to Maximo. So when and let's be clear, we're talking about enterprise services, right, and queue-based, and I should say be more specific and say queue-based messages. So you're doing an enterprise service through the queue. And today, if you post a message and you happen on your client side, you I'll say bulk up the data, you might put 20 assets in a post. That message, whether it's XML or JSON, will go into the queue as one message with 20, call it 20 records or 20 instances of assets in there. When that processes from the queue into Maximo, it's basically an all or nothing. If the 13th message fails, the transactions roll back, the message sits in the queue, and you have no assets. The first 12 didn't make it into the queue. And you could go into the message reprocessing, open up the message, find the error, correct it, and reprocess it if you wanted to. So that's how it works today. With the new feature, if you set this flag on, when you post that 20, using the flag, we take the message and we'll basically split it and create 20 messages in the queue. So when those things process now, they're all independent of each other. If 13th message errors out, it sits in the queue, but messages 1 to 12 go in and 14 to 20 go in. So only that one message stays in the message reprocessing for error handling. So the key is it's splitting. It's much more friendlier in terms of being able to give you a little more scalability in terms of how many messages you push in, and it basically isolates the errors down to individual transactions.
Yeah, that's a great feature. And is this system property available in 7.6 already? Is this something we can go ahead and implement?
Good question. We may have to put that in a follow-up note. I believe it's 8. I don't know if we backported it to 7.6, so let's take that as a to-do on my end to get you an answer on that.
All right.
It definitely was added for 8. I think some of the work, integration work that we're doing among products within the suite might have drove this initially. But the way to think of it is it's basically giving you the behavior that you get with file loading from a spreadsheet file or an XML file. You get that behavior from an HTTP post.
Okay. Well, I can definitely see some advantages to that. I know, with some of our financial interfaces, a lot of things get batch posted coming from a financials application. So being able to split those up and let the good stuff go through and trap the things that fails is definitely a nice feature. So looking forward to playing around with that one some. So those were the 3 takeaways that we had. Let's go back to our chat here and see what some of the folks in the audience might be asking about. So let's see.
I'm looking here. So why API key versus OAuth 2?
Yeah.
I don't know. I probably should, but I don't know if OAuth 2 was considered or not. I can follow up and give you a response on that.
Sure, we can look into that one. There's a question here about performance differences as well. Have you seen any significant performance changes between Kafka and the JMS? Actually,
so we're actually in the middle of some testing on this. I was on a call with some development folks maybe it was about 2 weeks ago. In some of the testing we've done, I do some work separately with our ERP adapters for Oracle and SAP, and we were noticing some better performance. Although I'll qualify that our testing was more with, kind of the single server, development environment type development type testing. We weren't purposely doing performance testing, but we do batch loads of data from Oracle, on a frequent basis as we get a system stood up, and we just noticed that it felt like the volume of data coming in is seemed quicker. But we are working on some testing right now, and I believe the goal is to publish results of that testing to give people a feel for what it looks like using Kafka.
Okay. And then there was a follow-up question on the queues. Is that just the continuous queues or continuous and sequential both now fall under the Kafka scheme?
They both are supported through Kafka. So we have support for both, inbound and outbound. And the main difference is the continuous queue is really driven through a cron task rather than the concept of an MDB.
Yeah, that is a big difference. I know, although I know many times we've had some folks that sometimes forget to uncomment that MDB line out of the
jar
one
file.
Of the jar file, and we're like, why aren't our continuous queues working? So, so crons are a little easier to get to, so that's a good thing. Let's get back to that split transaction one. How does that apply? Is it globally? Is it across all my integrations? Can I set it for some, not for others?
Yeah, the current implementation is global. So if you are doing posts of data to enterprise services, this is going to split any of those posts. So we right now we have a global. My guess is if we had enough demand to make it more fine grained, we might do that. Well, I guess we'll see if that we get driven to kind of enhance that in that way.
Okay. All right. Another question that I thought of, with 7.6 and the older versions, for a long time now, there's been adapters that are available for SAP and Oracle. Will those adapters still be available with Mass 8, with Manage? And are they changing in any way beyond the changes that we've talked about with the deployment?
Yeah, they're still there. They'll be there just in the same way. They are available. Their deployment is pretty much identical. I mean, if anybody who's done a deployment, obviously, if you're in Mass and you're using Kafka, that part of the configuration is different. But other than that, the deployment is pretty much the same. And I guess the main difference is today, when you take in 7.6, when you take the adapter, what happens is in the admin workstation, you have a folder buried under the Maximo tree structure where you have a folder for Oracle, folder for SAP, where all the ERP components that an implementer carries over to Oracle or SAP. You grab those files and you bring them over to those systems and you do those installation and configuration. You'll have something similar with Mass, but I believe you'll be going through the admin pod, but still basically doing a download of the contents of what amounts to a folder of files. But the files themselves, all those details are really not changing at all. Okay,
very good. All right. And we've got a follow-up question on the split transactions. And I guess the continuous queue question was actually, does the split transaction work on the sequential queues?
Yeah, the split transaction is splitting it no matter which queue. It's independent of which queue you're pointing to for your enterprise service, so it doesn't matter.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We've talked about the API keys in 7.6 and Kafka. I guess looking ahead to Mass and just the integration framework as a whole, any new integration points that are included in that? Maybe any of the ones that are part of the industry solutions that are kind of being brought into core, or any new adapters? I've heard some rumors about Workday.
Yeah, a couple things there, I'd say. So for new integrations, the way I would probably say it is, one thing with Mass and even with 7.6, if for those of you familiar with what's going on with Maximo Mobile and that solution, we have a new UI framework and we're building applications. We're starting in the Maximo mobile area, but we'll eventually evolve into applications, desktop type applications, not necessarily mobile. And those will drive, what they'll drive is not new published channels and enterprise services, but they will drive probably a lot of new object structures. So any of those will be available to you through the REST API and could be connected to a channel or a service if that's the need. But you'll see kind of an increase there if nowhere else in terms of new integration points.
Yeah.
Regarding Workday, that's correct. We are actively working on a Workday integration.
Great.
Right now, our initial target is to support 2 areas around financials. So basically, integration of accounts and journal transactions between Maximo and Workday, as well as in the HR area, or they call it HCM now. In that area, integrating labor worker, or they call it worker data in Workday, to Maximo, creating labor, craft, person records, skills, and then likewise the labor entry that goes in Maximo would automatically be integrated to the time reporting over in Workday. And these are following kind of the patterns we have with integration with SAP and Oracle. So that's where we're starting. Our hope is to have the initial version available, by the end of this month or early next month. And we are starting on the initial releases will be 7.6. We're working towards a support on Mass. I don't know exactly when that'll be. If it'll be the next Mass release, 8.6 or 8.7, that hasn't been determined yet.
Great, fantastic. Lots of good stuff coming down the pipe for sure. So, any closing thoughts? Any final words of wisdom from the integration guru?
No, I would just say we're. I think our focus, I think most people would know who've been in touch with us is around the REST API. And again, part of that's mainly because that's where people want to use it. That's obviously the hot technology from an integration perspective. Plus, we're getting a lot of internal demand from our own applications to use it. So I expect that will continue to evolve in the Maximo community. We have the REST guide that's out there. And
it's a great guide. I know we've used it quite a bit in developing some of the interfaces we've done.
Yeah, and it's, myself and Anamitra, mainly Anamitra, doing a lot of updates to that on a frequent basis. So if you do use that guide, I'd periodically reach back and see if there's any updates and just grab the latest version every so often to catch into the latest updates.
Sure. All right. Well, very good. Well, we are just about out of time, so I want to thank everyone for joining us today. The slides and information will be published post-chat here. If you've got any follow-on questions, definitely feel free to reach back out to us. We'd be happy to get answers to those to you and work with you on any of your integration needs. Alex, back over to you. I know she lost audio earlier, so I'm not sure if she's joined us again yet. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Tom, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate your time and insights into what's coming with the integrations in Mass 8, and we look forward to continuing to work with it.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.